And we're live.
Hello!
La la la.
La la la.
Hello.
So we're still doing the voice? Do you still want to do it? Yes.
We still got to do the voice.
Still got to do the voice.
At some point, we might have to do a new intro.
You know,
we might have to revamp, rebrand a little, something new.
You know, the great thing about that particular Seinfeld episode, hello!
Cramerica.
It's well, not only that, that is one of the all-time great episodes. And what's so amazing about Seinfeld is that it had a very interesting arc. It had like when you got to season 3 and especially season 4, and then for like 4, 5, and 6, it was amazing. It got a little slow.
You've missed so many episodes, though. Every time I talk about an episode, look, I could write a dissertation in Seinfeld. Honestly, it should be like PhD level.
I'm sure there are courses taught on Seinfeld.
I could definitely get.
But then season 9 was so on fire. It's like unbelievable. So the thing about the hello episode is that you forget that this is the episode where George is basically being offered a severance package to quit his job, to leave the business because they don't want him there anymore. George, leave now.
Wait, was this when he
has his private bathroom?
Right. Okay, that's right. Well, but was that when he had to build a private office in the utility room because they locked him out of his office?
We'll give you half pay to leave. But if I stay the whole year,
that's why it's funny to me. That was also Cramerica where he had the intern.
We had the intern, and he's like, and then George took a couple of ice cubes from you. It's like the show still, yes, it still has its relevancy today.
It's so friggin' funny.
So welcome to Thursday night Generational Change, the special 8 p.m. start time. And why are we starting at 8 p.m.?
I'm Jen.
You are?
I'm Jen.
And I'm Peter. So why are we starting at 8 p.m. tonight?
Because we have to accommodate one of our early birds.
Yes. Seinfeld's too good for the early bird. No, we're accommodating a gentleman who
It's not even that early. I don't care. No, 8 o'clock is not that's not early. It's when you're doing Jordan time, it's 5. That's the early bird.
We could not have on our esteemed colleague, as I would call him, because he's that frequent of a guest, on the show this evening because apparently we can afford as much war as humanly possible.
Well, Janet Yellen said so.
So did the president.
Okay.
After Janet Yellen said so.
Because we can afford all the wars.
But we can't afford, and apparently Mehdi Hassan, who is no longer allowed on MSNBC, at least for the foreseeable future, totally coincidental, came out and said, we apparently can't afford universal health care, but we can afford all these wars. I mean, hey, credit.
He said that, but after he was let go.
Of course, because then you realize that it doesn't matter how much corporate tack.
I still don't see how they get away with letting go those 3, and there's not going to be some sort of legal ramifications because that's pretty just discriminatory on its face almost. It's pretty blatant.
It is, but let's...
Islamophobia running amok.
That's one of many problems we have, but of course the economic problem.
And again, I'm not sure. You told me they were all Muslim. I don't know that.
The 3 gentlemen that were...
I know that they're all of Arabic descent, but there's also, again, there are Christian Palestinians. There's all sorts of different kinds of peeps. It doesn't mean that... I'm just saying, I don't know what the discrimination is. Is it color or is it religion? I don't know. Maybe it's both.
Maybe it is both. You know him from Real Progressives, and of course, you know him from the Macro and Cheese podcast. Stevie Grumbine, welcome back as always to Generational Change.
Hey. Thanks for having me on, guys. Thanks for making special time for me.
It's not
you are special.
You are special. Yeah. Isn't that special?
He's special. Tap him on the head. So, of course, there's 1,000,001 problems going on in the world right now.
We got some issues, Steve. We're having some issues, man. But apparently...
Steve, I thought we were 30 trillion in debt.
But yet, Steve, we can afford 2 wars. Did you hear? We can afford 2 wars.
Yeah.
The contradictions are getting pretty loud if you're listening.
Oh, yeah. Well, which contradiction is worse? That or that they don't see the similarity between Ukraine and Russia and Israel? They don't see that. That is
all the above. I don't think any of this. The thing is that I don't think they give a shit about whether this is contradictory or not. What they care about is that there are a lot of people out there that are suckling on the teat, that drink mother's milk, that have a bib and a binky still, that really can't wait till election day. They're going to vote. They're going to wear their sticker on their forehead. And they're so normie that everything they say just, give me more of that. And
but you do get
that's why they're getting away with it.
But you do get the sense that there is a change in the air happening right now. You do get that, don't you?
There's a change in the air. Unfortunately, it's not a change in the air that is going to help us get somewhere. That's my concern. There's a change in the air, a different flavor of distraction. But we're not talking. When I've been on here, like you said, many times, and let's go back, way back, the beginning of the Biden administration at his first State of the Union address. Talked about it then. I'll talk about it now. He had already started trying to make China out to be the boogeyman. In there, he had plotted and planned. And because what happens when you're a nation that has stopped spending, that has cut the spigot off, and has not done the necessary things to keep your country afloat, doing well, you end up having to find ways to spend money. But if the narrative is we can't spend money, we're broke, then the only way that you can spend money is if it's for the good old US of A military or something of that nature. Humanitarian aid, we've got to manufacture consent, we've got to manufacture an enemy. Hillary had already started manufacturing the Putin enemy during the Bernie Sanders campaign. Then Biden said, hold my beer, when he got in and said, let's go ahead and double down and let's bring China into, not incoincidentally, two of the top players in the BRICS movement right now. So I think there's an awful lot to look at here that I think plays right into all the other stories that we're going to probably talk about tonight.
I think it's just a hot mess. And it's so interesting how there is zero consistency. It is just the most absurd. In all seriousness, my soap opera, I watch Days of Our Lives, is infinitely more consistent than what we're seeing here. Because so you're getting us ready to have, you want to have issues with China and Russia, but then you're hanging out with Modi when he comes here from India. You know, that's the I in the BRICS. So like, I don't understand, like what game is that, right? Other than, you know, military industrial complex profit. Like that's how, to me, it just appears like, you know, that's the ultimate goal here. And I think that what really, yes, there is this horrible genocide that is happening. And I think that is how we're somehow going to end up in a situation with Iran. Like this is, to me, like this is just not, we're going to end up in 3 wars simultaneously. That's what I think.
Yeah, just remember this. War is profitable, and I'm not just talking about profitable for the military industrial complex. If you hear nothing else from me, just know that money gets into the economy when the government spends it. It doesn't get into the economy from banks. It gets into the economy when the federal government writes a law and authorizes spending. That's how money gets into the economy. You get debt money, you get loans in the economy from banks. But the country, when it spends, if it tells you it's going to give you Medicare for all, if it tells you it's going to give you free education or pay off all the student debt, that right there takes a piece of coercive debt away from the capitalist hands that allows them to control us. So they're not going to have money for those things, because the purpose of the debt isn't so that the government makes money. The purpose of the debt is to ensure that we don't have choices, that we have to do whatever the business class decides they want us to do. And that right there is all part and parcel with this. And so to keep that ruse going, the only way that they can spend money, like from the federal government at this point, after spending all this money during the COVID pandemic, that everybody said, oh, wait a minute. Yeah. Nobody thought to say, where's the money coming from? Nobody asked, hey, why didn't my taxes go up to pay for it? Where'd that money come from? Nobody said a word about it. So here we are now. We have to get rid of that. We had to pretend that the pandemic is not a thing anymore. Hey, it's all forgotten now. We're back to normal. Well, now we have to have a new way of spending money that doesn't involve giving it to regular people. And the way to do that, now that they have reduced the deficit, they've raised interest rates, etc., the way to do that is to spend in the military. And we're back to Ronald Reagan era. This is exactly the Reagan revolution right here. This is how Ronald Reagan implemented military Keynesianism through his absolute crazy spending on the fight with Russia. Well, here we are. You know, history repeats itself once again. That's what you're seeing right now.
Well, you look like you're ready for Red China, so you know we're definitely yeah. I mean, come on. At this point, the whole goal, I think, is just to turn this country into the haves and the have-nots, but basically just have a serfs class. They don't want they don't want working people to have the type of uprising that they're attempting to have right now.
And I think people, if you don't see the connection between this and what's going on at Cop City and Atlanta, like this is like all kind of connected. It's like they're preparing for what they anticipate will be increased unrest. Like that is what is being prepared for. And the over militarization, that's been happening for a long time, but they are preparing for people to go off the deep end. Like that's what they're doing. So they're getting all their military ducks in a row. And I think it's very scary. This is extremely fascist.
And the other problem is that you really don't have anybody forcefully coming out and saying that this is not the way, that, we have another, there's another path, and people like, the Bernie Sanders of the world are way too quiet. And, you're like looking around saying, is somebody going to say, let's stop this, let's pull back, let's not go crazy. Like we're this close to World War III. I think people have to realize that that's not hyperbolic anymore, because you're not talking about just one little thing. You're talking about an actual ground war in the Middle East of immense proportions, where you now have Hezbollah saying that they will get involved.
Okay, Israel has been having bombing back and forth already with Lebanon, and they've already been getting into it with Syria a little bit. This is all that this is going to do is lead to a situation
where China and Russia are going to get involved if Iran is drawn into
that.
this.
Ask yourself why. Seriously. I want you all to think about this in a slightly different lens, right? Well, profit for the corporations. But ultimately, you can go back to slave times. You can go back to the 1860s and realize that when they shifted away from chattel slavery, they had to have a way of maintaining the means of production to keep the capitalist order intact. So what did? They instituted things like vagrancy laws and stuff to keep blacks back on the plantation, even though slavery had ended. Well, they got rid of those laws through the Jim Crow era. They got through a bunch of the other stuff. But what they've done is they've created an open air prison for us now. Okay. Similar to what you saw in slave times. The only difference is we think we're free. We actually believe we're free. Okay. And we believe that we're voting for people and they're going to do things for us. And the reality is that the police state that you're talking about, the very Cop City stuff, we know, at least if we've done our history, we know that policing is a form of control for capital. It's not to keep us safe. It's purely to keep us in line for capital. And so what is happening? I was talking to John Kiriakou today. There's people in Seattle making over $70,000 a year, literally living in their cars. They can't get a place to live, but they're making $70,000 a year. And their credit's bad, so what have they done? They've created all these parking lots where people can sleep in their car to live, to work. This is the new norm they're trying to create, and it's all based on us believing, worthlessly, by the way, that the nation is broke. But Janet Yellen did something, didn't she? Janet Yellen let the cat out of the bag. Janet Yellen's like, shit, yeah, we can handle a couple wars. Well, why couldn't you handle getting rid of student debt, Janet? Why couldn't you handle Medicare for all, Janet? Damn it, Janet. Why couldn't you handle? Yeah. Why couldn't you? And
I don't know what that
is. I know he doesn't know what it's from. And that's what's great. So guys, if you know, and I'm not going to tell you either. Damn it, Janet. Slut. Sorry.
No, it sounds familiar. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to play a clip of the Secretary of the Treasury and apparently the President of the United States saying that, oh, yes, we can afford these things, but it's what we want, not what you want or need.
You'll get nothing.
And like it.
America, can the West afford another war at this time?
I think the answer is absolutely. America can certainly afford to stand with Israel and to support Israel's military needs. And we also can and must support Ukraine in its struggle against Russia. And look, the American economy is doing extremely well.
Are the wars in Israel and Ukraine more than the United States can take on at the same time?
We're the United States of America, for God's sake. the most powerful nation in the history, not in the world, in the history of the world. The history of the world. We can take care of both of these and still maintain our overall international defense. We have the capacity to do this, and we have an obligation to. We are the essential nation, as to paraphrase the former Secretary of State. And if we don't, who does?
Oh my God, he barely could utter those words. It was horrible.
This is so like, it's just.
Come on, man. I didn't. Come on.
I'm glad they're saying the quiet part out loud. Good. Please tell everybody how we can afford to be doing all of these things, because it really makes what we're doing a lot easier to sell when people are like, well, we can afford all of these things.
But nobody is learning the lesson. Nobody. I'm not joking. The minute that
you gotta give it a little time, like from now, this just happened yesterday where they actually said that little quiet part out loud.
I didn't say
I know, but I'm telling you right now.
I think what I meant, you know the thing. I can only do it for so long, but it's such a, the funny thing is, Steve, if you're the most neutral political observer who doesn't really,
who is that? Who would that be?
I'm just using because we are in the echo chamber, because we really do follow this stuff, and it's a very small percentage of the population that really does. But to a neutral observer on the outside, they just observe the president for 5 minutes, and they're thinking to themselves, man, this guy definitely needs the hook. No, let's keep him in there for another 5 years. Like, that is, if that doesn't scream the system's broken, I don't know what does.
We're running a hospice in DC, is what it seems like
really
to me.
Scary,
it's like an
man.
assisted living situation.
It is. It's not good.
Well, you can clearly see he doesn't have his faculties about him. Okay.
No.
Which should tell you more than ever. And Trump didn't have it all going on either. He didn't understand everything either. And when you
but he didn't understand everything when he was in the 80s. So,
the point I'm making here is really super important. They're just puppets. They're not really doing the do. Beating up on Biden is like punching a piñata and thinking you did something.
Bingo.
Biden is a puppet. He is nothing. He's literally nothing. He is a guy that will go along to get along with the people that run the government. And when I say run the government, I mean, roll your eyes all you want, but there are people that literally work in government that have a career there, 40, 50-year careers that literally run the government, that run these think tanks.
You know what Carlin says. They're the owners. You got owners, right. And it's not the politicians. There's owners.
Well, I've been saying all along that Antony Blinken is the president. I mean, he's the first guy that went and met with Netanyahu. I mean, that's not the president, not the vice president. The Secretary of State was the first person who met with the prime minister of Israel, who's about to potentially start World War III. That's the first person who goes and speaks to him. To me, that's the president of the United States.
Where's that image of Joe hugging Netanyahu? Because I got to tell you, that won't age well. Okay. No. This whole thing is not going to age well. The people that are with that, you were on the wrong side of history. I assure you, you are on the wrong side of it. You're the lady screaming behind the black girl trying to go to college. You know that picture? You're that lady.
But the question is, Steve, is anybody, and I mean anybody, going to pay a political price for this? Because there is going to be so much blood that is going to be spilled in the not too distant future. It's already happening. And the way that they're trying to, say, well, we didn't bomb a hospital or it was bombing up, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that the Zionist movement now feels they have their opportunity, their opening, if you will, to commit a genocide and get away with it.
They've been getting away with it.
Not like this.
No, this is expedient. This is no. This is expedient. But if you were to consolidate the past 75 years, really the number, the body count this is pretty par for the course. This is just within a very small time frame. Thoughts?
What do you think a political price would be for a puppet? I mean, seriously, I said he was a puppet. What do you think a political price?
How much could you buy a puppet for?
I mean it literally, though.
Yeah, no. Well, for the president, I mean, I can tell you, like a congressional seat, you costs that, like, I don't know how much would it cost, because you could probably buy a congressperson for a couple $1 million. You easily.
In some cases, less.
Yeah, in some cases less. But so for a couple $1 million, you could buy a congressperson, potentially a senator. I don't know. How much would a president cost?
Well,
but the real
now,
issue is that person, as you said, is not the person with power anyway. You could pay somebody to sit there. But even if they go in there and they say, like Trump, I'm going to stop this war in Syria, and then the deep state taps on his shoulder and says, yeah, no, you're not going to do that. And he's like, oh, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this. So it's like, even if you put someone there that, you know, even if you pay top dollar and get yourself a really fine president, what are they going to do?
And that's the whole irony of this whole circumstance.
You know what happens if you say no to deep state?
Well, in this case, you haven't. This, like I said, I was at RFK's launch a couple of weeks ago, and so by that degree, you would think that the energy in that room, the amount of people that were there, even if you believe that a lot of his stuff is quirky, and it certainly is, he has an opportunity to really create a completely different political landscape in this country, and yet he's more hawkish in favor of Israel than Trump or Biden is. I mean, that's absolutely insane.
Why didn't you meet up with Steve? You should have met up with Steve.
Steve doesn't exactly live near Philadelphia.
No, but he can.
No, I don't.
How far are you from Philly?
I'm 2 hours.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's long. Okay.
Yeah, but I'm also a little bit of a homebody. I work from home, got kids. That's why I'm such a hard get when it comes to doing these anymore.
Well, we're grateful that you're here, but
I try not to leave my house. He makes me leave
I think you would agree that there's definitely something in the air here, but it just seems like we keep getting these like roadblocks thrown at us. And yet at the same time, you have the Secretary of Treasury and then the president saying to our faces, yeah, we're kind of just lying to you the entire time. We're just lying.
War for everybody.
Who's gonna make us pay for our lying? Like there is no.
Look. We keep push. I'm gonna say this. You all will probably forget I said it, but I'm gonna say it now. Believing that you can vote your way to any change whatsoever. Believing in politics, like I watched this guy. Did you hear that speech? It's all theater. I've gotten to the point now where it's so far beyond the pale that I can't take it seriously. And I'm saying this quite literally, and I know that drives folks crazy.
No, I get it. I can't watch. That's why I don't watch that stuff.
What I'm saying to you is this. They sat there and told you point blank, we can afford 2 wars. What are you talking about? Of course we can do that. They didn't even blink an eye. There was not any, well, what about the debt? Where are we going to come up with the money? Where are we going to find the? They didn't even bother with the lie. They just went straight to the punchline, right? And these dumb fucks that sit there and got to eat some more MSNBC. Hey, did you hear TYT today? Hey, did you hear CNN? Hey, did you hear Fox News? National debt's out of control. We can afford 2 wars. And they're just like lapping it up. And you got to talk to them. And they get that weird, like, anyway, what were you talking about? I mean, they literally like stop almost like they have like an aneurysm. And then they go right back to whatever they were doing. It's impossible to penetrate that because to truly embrace what I just said. And I'm not the first person to ever say it, but I'm convicted of it. To actually embrace what I just said means you have to change a lot of other downstream thoughts you think you got going on. You have to fundamentally change the emphasis of what you do when you recognize that the entire political theater is a lie. It's there to manufacture consent and nothing more. These things that are happening are being done for different reasons than what they're being portrayed for. I want you to understand, in very, very short time, there is going to be, I think it was estimated at 250 days a year, there are going to be sandstorms sweeping through Pakistan and the like. The climate crisis has gotten so bad that salt water is seeping into the drinking water, making the lands completely unusable. We're talking about things that create mass migrations. Well, what is Joltin' Joe Biden doing right now? He's building a fucking wall that Trump recommended down in fucking Mexico. Okay. Like this is the stuff you do when you understand what's coming. This has nothing to do with anything about money. It has everything to do with the fact that climate crisis is coming. They're scared they're going to get overrun when those island nations get wiped out and go underwater. When Florida goes underwater, what are we going to do with DeSantis? I mean, we have a whole bunch of insanity that is about to take place. And this is all about jockeying for what's going to happen with climate crisis as well, because they know it's coming, but they know people don't believe it. And they know that the capital order isn't going to allow that to be the focus. So they've shifted the game to war. War allows us to do all kinds of crazy things without question. We get away with it. And then afterwards, the books start getting written. Afterwards, everybody gets rich writing their autobiography about what happened during the 100-day war in Pakistan or in Israel or whatever. And now the next set of bullshit lies are coming. Well, got to read it page by page. Oh my God, it was such a great book. I'm telling you right now, this is all 100% about manufacturing consent. They know that they create money. Hey, Fed, keystroke that shit into the Treasury's general account. What about 20 million? Whatever. What about 20 billion? Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we create that money out of thin air. And we've convinced a bunch of dummies that, hey, we're broke, we got to go to banks. And then they got the Rothschilds and they got all the other fairy tales they got to tell each other to try. But in reality, at the end of the day, the fact is that there are very wealthy interests, probably including the Rothschilds, but there's very wealthy people that started this country up that have been rich for centuries, way beyond any of our Magna Cartas or any of the other founding documents, that are not giving up that power without us revolting, without us doing something. That's why you got Cop City. They know the only chance we have of getting out of this is through revolution. And that's the hard part. People don't want to hear. They don't want to say it out loud. It's scary. Oh my God. But hey, look, you're either a slave and you're going through it and you're doing it willingly and you're pretending the stuff you hear on the thing isn't real. And if you remember 1984, 2 Minutes of Hate, where they're all yelling at the screen, Ingsoc, yeah, screaming at, what was his name? Rothstein or what was his name? Do you all remember the dude? Anyway, they manufacture that shit. And that right there is, it's literally the thing that's blocking. Nobody can handle the truth. They're afraid. They're terrified of it. I probably sound like a kook right now saying it, but I know I'm right.
No, I think right now the value of
Goldstein. Thank you, Jonathan.
No, the value of of what you represent, what Fidel talks about, what obviously Stephanie Kelton talks about, this is so very relevant right now because people really are scared, and the whole caveat of, do you want to live on your knee? Do you want to die on your feet, or do you want to live on your knees? And I know that there are people who think that they're capable of dying on their feet, but it's just easier to want to stay alive. But if it means living in bondage, whatever that may be, whether it's physical bondage, economic bondage, people are just going to essentially take what they're going to take. But that's also because we don't have a lot of leaders out there right now that are speaking up at such a critical time. There isn't this very loud voice in the room that's telling Joe Biden, you are a failure, and you are dragging this country straight to hell, even if it isn't him. Just, obviously he's not the one calling the shots. But just for somebody to go out there and say, we want to live and we want to thrive, that is beneath almost anybody right now. Because they're kind of looking at it as sort of survival mode, I think. Because I do think that there is going to be some type of a mass extinction where hundreds of millions of people may very well die in the near future. And so their attitude is,
we're going to see 1 million people dying within the next week at this rate.
So that attitude just becomes, well, it sucks that it's going to happen to them, but, better them than me. And I think a lot of people are going to employ that attitude. I think I mentioned earlier today, and we'll talk about it now for a hot minute. I was at a conference in Miami today for hotel investors. And there was a guy who went on stage who was from Manhattan. Actually, he's from Boca and went to Ivy League, Manhattan, the whole 9 yards. And so he's up there and is basically trying to convince the audience. If I didn't know any better, based on the way he was talking, he was suggesting that even though the commercial real estate industry is taking a major hit in many ways, that everything's great. And you know how I know everything's great? Because the infrastructure bill is fantastic. And all I'm thinking is, even in a room like this, you're getting people looking at this guy like, are you out of your goddamn mind? I mean, the level of being in such a bubble, and was full-throatedly basically saying how great Joe Biden is, how great the economy is, how great all of these things are. You know what? For the very, very wealthy in this country, yeah, the economy's doing great. So when you look around and say, well, hey, it's going great for me, why isn't it going great for everybody else? But they don't think past that point. They're not asking questions. And even if they are, it's always the benevolent nonprofit attitude about how we solve these problems. He had the balls to bring up what you brought up at the beginning. There are people in this country, particularly as he mentioned in Seattle, Washington, where people are making over $70,000 a year and they're living in a car. So what's the solution? Well, he didn't talk about universal health care. He didn't talk about a living wage. He didn't even talk about something like a universal basic income, which could be a temporary solution, not a long-term solution. And he sure as hell was not talking about a federal jobs guarantee with full benefits. No, he's not talking about that. And none of the other people who are sitting around with a thumb square up their ass about what the real problem is here. They can identify it, but they're not going to actually address the real solution. So for anybody who doesn't understand modern monetary theory, that's something that people need to know and they need to understand, especially right more than ever. They need to understand it right now.
Yeah, I just interviewed two aspiring doctoral students that wrote a fantastic paper with my hero, Jason Hickel. And this paper was basically an expose for environmental and ecological activists and academics in particular, to tell them, hey, you guys understand the ecology and the environment, but you don't understand the economy. You need to marry. And I jokingly said it was like, those old peanut butter commercials where the ecological folks are coming this way and the economists or the MMTers are coming this way. One has chocolate, one has peanut butter. They come together and you got a Reese's peanut butter cup, right? And they're made for each other. And Jason Hickel is a full-blown MMTer now. But when I asked them, I was like, so what do you think is the value in teaching MMT? Because to be fair, you need access to power. You need to be able to actually have a literal ability to have agency in the system, to be able to vote and have it make a difference. And they said, we're hoping that it will radicalize people. And I about lost myself. I was like, oh my God, have you guys been listening to my podcast for the last 5 years? This is exactly the point. People blow me off like I'm just like I'm the one that doesn't get it.
All right. So you want to have a little fun? You want to have a little fun?
I don't know. I don't like fun. I don't like fun.
Let's
hold on.
Steve wants to have a little fun. Steve was going to see it eventually. So
I
have
saw
a little
it.
fun, Steve.
I always
doesn't make any sense. We can still print all the money in the world.
That's like. It's funny, but it's like, to me, it's like someone saying gravity doesn't make sense. I understand it's complicated to understand because I don't really completely understand that either, but it just is.
How about we
start? But go ahead, Steve.
Let's just be simple. Let's keep it simple, smiley. Let's not get in the weeds. The bottom line is that the nation has the ability to write laws. The dollar is a law. It's a patent of the United States government, the US dollar. It's a unit of account, meaning that it's a measurement. It's an inch. It's freely created by the government. They put laws around how it can be created too. They said only Congress can write laws and has the power of the purse. So this is rules. This is an overlay over what can be. So Congress alone can do that. Well, guess what? Congress wrote a bill back in 1913 called the Federal Reserve Act that gave banks the right to give IOUs, in other words, debts, denominated in the government's unit of account. So the government controls all the rules and laws that govern banks, period. Okay? Period. However, there's something going on there, right? Because obviously, if I'm sitting there telling you we can't vote our way to a Green New Deal, we can't do this to a Green New Deal, we can't, get what we want. We can't get healthcare. We can't get price control. We can't do anything, right? Everything that makes sense isn't done. You're like, wait a minute, what's going on here? The fact is the government itself, and not just the United States government, the UK, the British pound, they created their own unit account. Japan, the yen, they created their own unit of account. This is not hard. This is not hard at all. They said, hey, what do we want? Let's call it the yen. And we'll go ahead and we'll issue a tax. So people have to have that yen. Doesn't matter if they have faith in it. Find faith when you're trying to go to jail as they're taking you away for not paying your tax. Okay, there's your faith. There's your faith. They use tax as the look. You have to pay your tax in the unit of account. Why? Does the government need your money to be able to spend? No, it just created a thin air, you bozo. This is the rule. This is the law. This is the trigger. The government spends. And you're like, I don't need this piece of shit money. What do I need with your money for? You're like, damn right, you don't need it. So let's make sure you do need it. We're going to put a tax on your house, brother. Oh, how do I pay that tax? Well, you need this money over here. Well, shit, how do I get it? Thank you for asking. Let me show you what I need you to do. This is so simple that you don't have to get any more complicated than that. What I just said right there, government spends it. You say, I don't need it. They say, you're right. We issue a tax. Now you need it to pay your tax. If you don't pay your tax, bad things happen. End of story. That's the beginning and the ending. Why did the Confederacy end up having hyperinflation and really, in effect, lose the war? Because they could not enforce a tax payable in the Confederate dollar. Because they couldn't enforce that tax. It had no staying power. The United States, the feds, the Northerners, they were able to maintain a tax. And it was the ability to maintain that tax that allowed them to marshal the resources to beat the South. That was it. And that's what you saw in World War II also. Exact same thing. Over and over again. And you're going to see it now. The power of the U.S. dollar. And it's like, and it doesn't make a bit of difference. I mean, I talked to Michael Hudson. And Michael Hudson's the fair-haired boy of the left. All the folks that are lefties that fancy themselves knowledgeable about economics always harken back to Michael Hudson. Love Michael Hudson. Michael Hudson will sit there and tell them point blank, the BRICS aren't going to bring the dollar down, you fool. The BRICS aren't going to knock the dollar down. Oh, but the next minute they're alone without Michael Hudson with them. They're like, the dollar is ending. The dollar is over. It's like, guys, as long as the federal government has an army, has police, is able to enforce a tax, that dollar is going precisely nowhere. I don't care if the BRICS are there or not. And it's unfortunate that people don't realize that in the end, you may lose all the faith in the world, but the United States says, guess what? We have a military and we're willing to make you see it our way. Okay. And you're going to see it our way with a bullet or a bomb on the global scene as well. And we've been doing this for a long time. Thank God, in so many ways, if you're paying attention, thank God for China and Russia for pushing back. The BRICS themselves are not necessarily ending the dollar, but they're providing a way out. You know, I just learned about these things called swap lines. And it's something that I had never really understood. But China has offered swap lines to South America. And what swap lines are is they allow the people in South America, in Argentina or Venezuela or whatever, to use their own currency to pay their debts. And that China will take their currency and say, no problem, where the U.S. uses the IMF and they put the debt payable in another currency that these people don't make on their own. So it traps them in a debt bubble. It's slavery. So this is a great, it's a moment. It's a moment here of people breaking free of that control. But that control is very real. And unless you can find a way to pay your taxes without the US dollar, which you can't, by the way, because they only accept the US dollar, the dollar will continue to do its damage on we the people. So that's why they're able to afford these bombs. That's why they're able to afford 5 wars if they want to. The question is, do we have enough planes? Do we have enough bombs? Do we have enough tanks? It has nothing to do with do we have enough money at all, period, zero.
Yeah, well, we have enough arms. We've got arms. Like, I mean, that's all we really do anymore is make weapons and means of destroying.
But why is that, Jen? Ask yourself why that is. It's the one thing they don't get pushback for, because everybody's ready to put the flag up and wave it around. USA, USA.
It's fear
Yes.
mongering.
Yes.
And so, right. So it's how you get everybody in line and to manufacture consent. And Russia always makes a really good enemy. We have to hate on Putin. And again, he's a really kind of authoritarian oligarch. I'll give you that. You know, I mean, I don't like him. I certainly wouldn't vote for him. He's not my guy, but you know, he's just an oligarch. I just don't understand like why it matters to people what language their oligarchs speak.
Which is why I'm convinced that a lot of people are starting to ask the right questions now. They're looking around and just thinking things are not good and you're making them so much worse. And unfortunately, you kind of have to drive people so far into the ground where eventually they're choking to death and they say, all right, well, like either I'm going to die or I'm going to fight. So you got to make a choice. And now the choice is perfectly clear that there needs to be a true labor uprising in this country based around the principles of MMT.
Can you pull Travers Wolf up for a minute?
Yes.
His cool guy comment here.
Sure.
You know, Steve is 2 steps behind. The future is digital. Governments control you through digital currency. It's still fiat, you fuck. I mean, seriously, I'm so tired of Coolio's thing. Yeah, let me tell Steve, it's 2 steps behind. I know all about the CBDCs. I know all about the shit. Stop.
It's all roads lead to the same place. Right,
exactly. Right. It's the same thing with you mean coins are different than paper, different than the digit and the thing?
None of them matter.
It's like Judas Priest. Oh, you mean this EBT card has dollars? It's different. Yes, it's the same fucking thing, and it all comes back to the currency issuer. It doesn't matter what form it's in. I mean, they may use that differently, and it has different rules around it. Big deal.
But if you want to be here, you're using it you have to pay things in
same exact principle. It's like, oh my God. Oh, why didn't I talk to Brett Scott about digital currency? Why didn't I talk to Rowan Gray, who's literally working on Capitol Hill as they're designing this? Why didn't I talk to Bob Hockett, who wrote the fucking book on it? Why didn't I talk to Raul Carrillo, who fucking is up there on Capitol Hill fighting about it too? You didn't know. You're 2 steps behind. Stop. God. It's annoying. Fuck.
And the biggest frauds are being committed, with digital currency, with crypto, I remember I never really invested in Bitcoin. But
before you go into your Bitcoin thing, what happens when there's no power? Because this is my question. When there's no more power, your Bitcoins will just sort of dissolve into the universe, and as would your dollars, basically.
Well, I remember what my point was that early on in Bitcoin, this is probably back in like 2013, 2014, somewhere around there, somebody had millions of dollars in Bitcoin, and they forgot their password. And by forgetting their password and entering it, apparently, here's what happened. Apparently, if you fail to enter your password correctly after a certain amount of tries, you are locked out of the account forever. The money is no longer yours. At that point, you have to say, if this is not a scam, forget that it's not a scam. If you lose your money this way, I don't have any sympathy for you anyway.
So let's compartmentalize 2 different things. Bitcoin, private currencies off the side. We've always had alternative currencies. Alternative currencies have been around since freaking Methuselah. I mean, it's not a big deal. Who cares if it's shitcoin, right? They have an artificial scarcity because they built the model so that there's always going to be a limited amount. Well, that's them trying to recreate the gold standard because reasons and Austrian things and things dumb people, libertarians do, right? So ultimately, we've got that dumb shit. But we also have the public space, and the public is trying to get involved in it too. Okay. The public is saying, hey, we have to provide a digital, it's not for speculation, it's for digital transactions. They're trying to find a way to give people, quote unquote, access to currency through the Fed. Okay. Now, one of the things that's interesting about this, and it's probably only interesting to me, okay, but the one of the reasons why they say they couldn't write off student debt previously was because individual borrowers did not have an account at the Fed. It had to be through the loan servicing group, and then over to the individual, right? So they had to give them the break because they had the account at the Fed, not us. So there was some push to give people access to direct banking at the Fed, to give them the ability to have an account at the Fed like the federal government has. But the problem is that what people don't understand is that inside the government sector, okay, and that includes agents of the government too, within the government sector, and that would include the Fed, even though people say, oh, it's private, the only thing federal does, whatever, right? Inside of the government sector, money has no real meaning, okay? It's only once it's outside in the private sector that money really has meaning. Everything inside the government doesn't use money within the government. The government uses money when it goes outside of the government into the private sector to mobilize real resources, to mobilize people, to go to Halliburton and get them to build tanks or planes or whatever, or go to whoever. That's when they spend money out into the non-government sector. That's where money has its place, because when it comes back to the government literally destroys money when it receives it back, because it creates it out of thin air. And that's why people, what are you going to just print all this money? Nope, absolutely not. We're not printing any fucking money. No money's being printed. Sorry, wrong answer. No money printing. It's literally they spend it into existence and they tax it out of existence. And so this is the way the system works. But more to the point, and I think this is where this has really got to get us, when people understand that the government creates it freely, when it writes a bill and it spends it into existence, and it's told that it can't do this for those people in Seattle who are living in a parking lot, or the people, it's not a question of, well, how come we have money for war but not them? The reason we have money for war and not them is because war is profitable for the military industrial complex, but by helping those people out, what you're doing is you're taking away the power of the capitalist class to get them for low wages and to get them into very bad situations that make them malleable and willing to do whatever it takes. This is why the private prison systems are thriving. This is why the drug enforcement is thriving. They want people to get busted for things. They want people to get hurt by things, because there's another industry there that they've created to create jobs that literally benefits from the misery. Okay. What is backing money? Resources are finite, not imaginary. What is backing money is the country's ability to collect the tax and nothing more. It's the full faith and credit and the productive capacity of the country, period. And we're nowhere near.
What he's talking about, though, like what you said, that the thing about, putting money in existence, it works so long as we have real resources. I think that's what
But I'm saying, but if you've got unemployed people or underemployed people, they're a resource. Labor is a fucking resource. Yeah. And these fucking Reich wingers, Sig Heil Reich wingers, that want to act like, oh, what are they printing money and it's going to inflate? And the fact of the matter is, the government itself has the absolute ability to not only institute price controls, because what did they find out? What did they find out during the pandemic? All of the inflation, with the exception of things that were from broken supply chains, came from price gouging, straight the fuck up.
Still is.
Empirical. Yeah. And these bootlickers will sit there and tell, well, they printed money and it caused inflation. Bootlickers. And it's like, get your tongue off that boot. Take your tongue off that boot and start listening. It's ridiculous. And they literally will kill people with austerity because they think it's going to create inflation instead of disciplining the oligarchs. Now, you think I'm saying this as if we have the power to do that within this system. And I'm here to tell you that knowing we could do it, but we don't do it, should radicalize the living hell out of the working class and should make the left rise up and do what it has to do. But it won't, because everybody will go back to sleep and say, hey, did you see what that guy said, the Republican down there in District 4? And all of a sudden, oh, yeah, he's talking about... And right back to it. Let's go back to sleep. Let's pretend like it's real again. No, too much truth there. I can't handle it. Let me go back to sleep. Let's talk about local politics now.
But we're seeing uprisings in all different aspects.
Oh yeah,
we're definitely seeing it happen.
Yeah. Steve,
deal with this.
Put this to bed real quick.
The national. Okay. So there's a part of me that really is angry, and there's a part of me that's like, okay, this guy's just like committed to being wrong on literally every subject
Don't
possible.
be too mean to our regulars. We like our regulars.
But
So-
hold on a minute. That's not technically his fault, because this is what is put out there by Fox News, by CNN.
Absolutely.
They
And if you
put this
listen to
out
them,
there.
and if you listen to them instead of listening to folks that are trying to just throw the shit overboard, and you ignore them, but you listen to that, you're going to get stuck with this shit, right? So here's the deal. The national debt is the sum total to a penny of every untaxed dollar in the economy today. That's it. That's what the national debt is. Why is that? Because the government tells you we will accept $1 for payment of $1 in tax. So technically it's a debt. It's a debt, however, that the government has no effort whatsoever to pay. Just because the government is saying, yes, we're in debt, doesn't mean that it's a debt that they can't sustain, because they literally print the money, right? They literally do that. So when you're talking about this stuff, the national debt is nothing more than the sum total. You could call it the net money supply, right? So the national debt is used as a boogeyman by both Republicans and Democrats, okay, to literally discipline labor. It's the coal in the stocking, right? It's the coal in the stocking story. If you're not going to be a good kid, you're going to get coal in the stocking, right? So what do? They tell you there's this horrible debt where irresponsible spending, it's through the roof. We can afford 2 wars.
Right.
Well,
it's fear-mongering.
What about the national debt?
But
right?
it's all the same how they scare people. If they scare you
Absolutely.
into believing that we can't afford it, then you're worried what's going to happen to the economy if we give everybody health care. It's all fear-mongering. And we're really we're like battered spouses in this country.
But why do you think they don't? Okay, so think about this for just a second, right? If you really think that companies are concerned with sick days for people, and so that, oh my God, we need to make sure they're healthy, so we need them to have health care, right? Most companies now are just simply portfolio managers. They're not producing anything.
Right, we don't make
They're
anything.
literally, they don't make shit. They're just portfolio managers. And they have a portfolio of things that they manage through the fire sector, fire being finance, real estate, and insurance. Okay. And so they manage their businesses through that. And this is why there's always stock buybacks. This is where the real action's going on. They're not making things for real. And the ones that are, one of the hardest things, and we have fights even in our own organization about this, since it's a really big deal. Okay, really big deal, is the concept that imports are a benefit and exports are a cost. And if you think about what I just said right there, you understand that I'm giving you a piece of paper for your real good and service you built with your hands, with your machines, with the gold, the silver, the lithium, whatever it is, the real resources. Your real resources are being transferred to me. I'm giving you a piece of paper. And that right there, people have it all backwards. They're like, well, you got money. Of course no. The rich don't care about money. They care about access to real resources. They care about freedom in that way. And so money is really more a thing about us at the bottom, right? It's really more of a way of controlling our lives, controlling our world, not theirs. Their world is controlled by access to real resources. And that's why you see the government frequently leveraging the military industrial complex to free up markets, and it's not markets so they can get, think about what company really needs African dollars of any nation down there. They don't need their money. They need the shit that's in the ground. Okay. And so this is what they're going after. They're not going after their money. They don't need their money. They need their real resources buried in the ground. And so this is the game that is being played. And when they don't play ball the right way, what do? They simply go ahead and start a war. And then they get it anyway. And what ends up happening now with this, China, Taiwan, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, this is all 100% about making sure that the world is unstabilized, that systems are fragile and that the government can, the U.S. interests can swoop in and reclaim territory. It's like creating an earthquake that brings everybody to their knees, and there they are swooping through to fix it for them. But it's really about power. It's got nothing to do with money. Money, again, is a construct that we need, and they use to great leverage to keep us in line. And it's really hard to make that paradigm stick when you keep going back to the old paradigm that you hear on Fox News. To Peter's point, you have to make an actual a conscious decision to not see the world through the propaganda lens. You've literally got to, and there's so many cliches about this. I don't want to be cliche. I want to be very fact-based. You've got to understand that the only thing that the government can't do is literally tell the truth. It's not that it can't pay for healthcare. It's not that it doesn't have an interest. Its class interest isn't to give you healthcare. It's not that, oh my God, why aren't they giving us healthcare? Because the minute they give you healthcare, they have taken away the capital class's strength of keeping you in this state where you're desperate. Every time you ask, why don't they? It's because they need control. And that's it.
Yeah, no, we are a feudal system at this point, and it feels like that. And the only levels really are between the incarcerated slaves and the quote unquote free slaves, because anybody that's free, unless you are in whatever the upper percentage is, you're a slave to capital.
Yes,
there's no way around it, and they want to keep us that way. That's sort of the whole point. So I see, which is why the whole concept of what language my oligarchs speak is just, to me, I can't get bogged down in that nationalism when the real issue isn't nation versus nation. Like, that's all just, to me, a bunch of other feudal serfs in other countries that speak another language that are dealing with their masters and their nonsense, and they are not my problem.
Steve, last topic before you go. You brought up this idea that electoral politics doesn't really matter. I think it does matter, but not to the extent that people make it out to be the end all be all. It's definitely not. It's definitely several steps down the rung. But my question is, why is there no one, particularly at the federal level, knowing what we know now, knowing that they can't even lie about it anymore? Why isn't there anybody at the federal level running on a federal jobs guarantee or a modern monetary theory?
Well, take a look at John Yarmouth. He was speaking today, and he kind of laid out the stuff, but he's the only one. Because what they've done, and this is what always happens, is the powers that be. Remember, I think we talked about this previously about the Peterson Foundation. And the Peterson Foundation is a group of rich people that are fanning the flames about the fear of the national debt. Okay. Nancy Pelosi is part of that. And so are a bunch of Republicans. It's Democrats, Republicans. So there's no party difference there. They're all part of this thing, all of them. And the point of it is to push maximum propaganda down to keep people thinking that we have to live in a state of austerity. Claire Mattei, I think I've spoken about her before as well, wrote a fantastic book called The Capital Order. And it talked about how economists invented austerity, and by that act, invented fascism as well. And she took the case of Mussolini in Italy, and she took the case of Churchill in the UK, and they had two separate ways of saying the same things, but ultimately austerity won in both places. Austerity was still the narrative in both places. Why? It was a knee-jerk reaction to the Bolshevik Revolution, a worker peasant-led revolution in the USSR in 1917. Okay, that was right when the world had a major, oh my God. And the Capital Order, people start realizing, oh shit, we could do something different. We don't have to do it this way. We don't need these rich oligarchs. And they said, we're gonna fix that. And so they instituted all these austerity programs across the board. And FDR, for as flawed a man as he was, and he was very flawed, and I've got a lot of problems with FDR, and I've got a lot of problems with Keynes, but those folks showed that they were trying to balance the difference between capital and labor. They tried this balance thing, But in reality, all they did was delay the inevitable, because we've watched the entire New Deal crumble over the years as libertarians not being party libertarians, but people with that libertarian streak, that libertarian mindset. They are literally the ones that have been fighting tooth and nail with the Powell memo and the Mount Pelerin Society to rip apart any public space. They want to make everything private. Once you privatize everything, now you can literally put a toll road in your front yard, and you can't get to A to B unless you pay a toll passing over my property. And this is the whole private property scam. And this is the right wing. And this is what we're dealing with right now, a huge ideological framework by which we're trying to make sure that no one has rights, that only people that are landowners and wealthy have any right whatsoever. And they have a right to their private property. And if you come on my property, I have a right to shoot you too. The castle doctor, all these different laws. Okay. So I think it's really important just to understand the role of capital, the role of private property, and the role of resource allocation, and knowing full well that if some country has real resources and they're not willing to give it up, you're going to find a coup, or you're going to find a war in short order, period, full stop.
Yeah, we're looking at that all over the place right now. I feel like everybody seems to be rising up in different places. And I do think it's eventually, I mean, what's going on in Africa, in Northern Africa, I think has been sort of sidelined here based on what's going on in Israel and Ukraine. But I'm not forgetting that. Like, that's a big thing that's going on there. And this sort of uprising against the colonizers is really, and in this country, to some extent, it's, in the labor movement, we're seeing that sort of mindset. And I somewhat find it inspired. And I know that it's going to be ugly, and I know that it's going to get worse, and it's definitely attached to violence, even though I'd rather it not be. But yet I feel inspired that we're seeing pockets of resistance in all different places. Fingers
crossed. I mean, it's the only way forward. I hate it. I'm not happy. I'm not in great health. I'm not a young man. I'm not, it will have grave impacts on my family, so from a personal standpoint, it's the worst possible thing. And yet at the same time, though, the deaths that come from policing in this country, the deaths that come from the wars around the world, the stuff that's happening with climate crisis, all the above come from this elite capture that we are stuck living as slaves in. If we're going to do anything about it, otherwise they're just going to build the spaceships off in the mountains like they did in the movies, and the rich are going to go and they're going to leave us here with the shit that they've left behind. And it's terrifying, quite frankly. Unfortunately, you asked the question, why aren't these politicians running on it? And it's because it sounds incredible. It sounds impossible. It sounds loony. And the minute you say it, somebody's going to say, but what about Weimar? What about Zimbabwe? What about? And instantly you see people in the chat doing this stuff right now.
Oh yeah, because people because we are so battered down and brainwashed and propagandized that we cannot accept simple things like, really, people, this is basic. We're so used to being told this whole austerity
ironically,
mindset.
Though, I think we're pretty close on healthcare. I know that we've gotten to a point where you're starting to see even the libertarian attitude of what is the most efficient, cost-effective way to run a healthcare system. There is no question. It is single-payer universal healthcare, and it's not. There is not a debate. No. There is not an argument. There is nothing other than the government's going to run it. No, the government is going to fund it, and the doctors and the nurses and everybody else is going to run it.
But see, and to me, the bottom line is, but yet there would be healthcare.
Correct. And there would be healthcare not based on how much juice out of a lemon I can squeeze out of you.
Hey, somebody asked a really good question. If you don't mind, can I take a crack at it? Richard, can you put that up there? Just Richard's comment real quick.
People don't understand foreign denominated debt.
This?
Yes. Okay. Yes. It's a really, really important point. Okay. Sure. When Germany lost World War I and they imposed the infamous Treaty of Versailles. Okay. The debt that Germany had to pay was not in Reichsmarks. They couldn't pay in their own currency.
Right.
They had to pay in French francs. Well, how does Germany get French francs? Germany would have to do something to purchase something, to build something, to get French francs to be able to pay that debt. Otherwise, their sovereign currency could have paid that debt, but it was intentionally imposed. And you could look at that as an early precursor to the IMF, what the IMF did. The IMF does. The IMF always, instead of the IMF going to Africa and helping these African nations in their own currency, they literally impose debt in a foreign currency that they can't do, because the whole goal of the IMF is to impose structural adjustments and to literally free up markets and extract resources from the country. The only way to do that is to make it so that they can't use their sovereign money to get out of that debt. It must be foreign denominated. In other words, might put it in US dollar debt in US dollars. You can borrow $100 million of US currency. Well, $100 million to a government that creates its own currency isn't a big deal until it's imposed that it can only be paid in US dollars. It can't be paid in French or, Ghana or, pesos or yen or whatever. And so foreign denominated debt is different than sovereign debt, because I, as a country, I create my own money and I create treasury bonds out of my own money. And you can buy treasury bonds only with US dollars. So like one of the most important things is when countries do business with each other. China will do business with the US. They'll sell goods and services into the US and they get US dollars back. They don't get yuan back. They get US dollars back. And so what does China decide to do with its US dollars? It parks them at the Fed, it buys treasury bonds with it, and then it uses those bonds to facilitate transactions within the United States. Warren Mosler, who is the father of MMT, would tell you that it's really not important what we're transacting in. What matters is what countries want to save in. What are countries saving in? And so they talk about de-dollarization, stuff like that. Well, it's fine. You're not going to buy goods and services through the year. You're not going to do business with the U.S. is what that means. Or it means getting your loans and stuff through swap lines with China and the BRICS, as opposed to taking out debt from the U.S. through the IMF and then getting stuck with all these structural adjustments and all the other evils that are like placed on top of those debts. So it's important to understand foreign denominated debt is always debt that has to be paid in a different currency, a currency you don't create. So you have to do something very different, which is how they start the extraction process in these global South countries. I hope that helped.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, when I think of things like the IMF, I just think of that's just like another arm of like, hegemony.
Empire.
It's just our way of keeping everybody in line. It's just, it's just all part of the same monster to me.
But as I've said, I really do believe we are turning a corner. I think that there are a lot of people who are so desperate now that they understand that the very people who are telling them, think of it this way, just kind of like full circle with the gentleman who was speaking at the event that I was at today, insisting that the economy isn't okay. The economy isn't good. The economy is great. The economy's great. And so even in a room filled with even affluent people, they're kind of like looking around like, what the hell is this guy talking about?
And some of those drugs.
Seriously, what is he on?
Yeah.
Like, what are you? Well, he's on whatever Joe Biden's on. Joe thinks things are good.
But imagine
Joe Biden's on a heroic dose of mushrooms, man.
Well, I don't know whether. Well, look, when there's definitely whatever they pump him full of to keep him remotely cognizant for short, brief bursts of time. You can tell when he's sundowning. Now, I don't know if they have him on something like Adderall or whatever they have him on, or Ritalin. I don't know. But that man is not with it.
No, and then you also have to look at the way that it's being portrayed. It isn't like they're not aware. That's the scariest part of all. So there's either a major disconnect with the affluent and the regular people of the country. And let's face it, at this point, you're looking at, they say that this country in terms of its poor is at about 25%. But if you were to factor in what percentage of people are literally one bad step, literally One bad step.
That's
on
like
the ground, and
2/3.
You're looking at probably at least 50%, if not higher.
Oh, I think it's
that this
2/3.
country is in really bad shape. And the fact that the person identified one of the crises, which is people who even have full-time, what would be considered a well-paying job, can't afford to live, have to live out of their car. They can identify that. But yet at the same time, they're not willing to identify the fundamental reasons as to why that is. We do have massive inflation. We do not have a living wage. We do not have universal health care. We have endless war. We have a for-profit prison, education, and health system. This is a country that is literally sinking into the abyss. Sinking into the abyss.
Excuse me while I go slip my wrists now.
I just had a moment here. Can I just share this with you?
Yes.
In Biden's speech, and it just came to me like a ton of Biden is saying we are the most powerful nation in the world, not just in the world, but in the history of the world.
History of the world.
Now think about this. We are the most powerful, and yet at the same time, we're so wimpified that we can't provide housing for the people in Seattle, that we can't implement price controls to maintain a economy that works for regular people, that we can't provide healthcare, etc. Now, I want you to understand that this is the kind of idiocy that capitalism breeds. Okay.
Oh yeah, we buy all that. We actually buy that.
Yes.
Yeah. I know. I find it so it's weird. And I even see this sort of dichotomy when we're talking about people in elected positions specifically. Like you'll be so consumed with who the president is. Oh my God, it matters. Like people, oh my God, we can't have Trump. We can't like this total fear thing. But then when that person's there, you seem to continually excuse why they can't get anything done and they have no power. So either they are the most powerful person or they can't get a $15 minimum wage because of the parliamentarian. But like both of those things can't be true. So it's the same thing. So either we are the most powerful country to have ever existed, or we are not. But if we are, then why can't we have things that much poorer countries have?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody has healthcare, really.
Just think about this, right? You can take it even further. Instead of even having healthcare through insurance, through Medicare for all, the government could just simply provide the payment directly to those folks, whatever they payment arrangements are. And literally never, ever you and I see a bill. We wouldn't even know what it costs. Doesn't even matter. Right.
Yeah.
That to me, that's the real power. But there's a capitalist angle, the entire concept of controlling us, not to resource, because they blow resources. Think how many yards or meters is Jeff Bezos's yacht? Just curious.
It's a 200, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's two football
This is a
fields,
man
right?
who has a lot of personal insecurity. He's got
two football fields of
this.
yacht. We're not talking about people that genuinely are concerned about
Two
real
football
resources.
fields is the size of his yacht, right? That's what you're saying.
Yes,
Well,
that's what I'm
Think
saying.
like 2 stadiums.
But here's
Yes.
well, it's not a yacht. It's a cruise ship.
That sounds
I
no.
mean,
That sounds
you know.
like that actually sounds like an aircraft carrier.
But here's the problem, Steve,
Okay.
and this is the whole thing about when people talk about taxing the rich in this country. You know, the one thing that a lot of conservatives are actually on board with is basically having, whether it's a flat tax or a sales tax. You can't even imagine what type of revenue would be generated with a sales tax on the obscene type of items that these mega rich billionaires spend their money on. They don't even get taxed on that. I would like to show you that, but I would like to think that that is something that we could have an agreement on, that would substantially change the narrative in terms of how this is done. If we were able to we have to take the wins where we can get them. You know, as far as I'm concerned, it's like what people suggested today when it comes to what's happening, and we'll wind down on this point. You know, it's kind of like what's happening right now in Israel in Gaza. Everyone thinks that there's no possible way that you can have a two-state solution. Well, you know what I say? If right now in this moment, you can have a two-state solution to avoid slaughtering what could be hundreds of thousands of innocent kids and, people, fine. but get something done. And it's the same thing here in this country. You know, we would love to have a federal jobs guarantee. We would love to have universal health care. But if the first domino that has to fall is something like the New York Health Act, which could potentially have a caveat where it's backed by federal money, so there's no shortfalls, I don't give a flying F at this point where it happens. Just something's got to happen. Something's got to happen in this country.
Something's got to happen
in a positive way.
Oh, well, I don't
because
know about
we're literally going straight to hell. And so for me, I don't see any other possibility, because it's either something of that magnitude is going to happen, or we're going to be killing each other in the streets for bread.
Well, I think
Like,
at this rate,
what's
we're
happening.
going to be incurring another 9/11. At this rate, to me, we're going to incur another 9/11. The wrath of the people against this country around the world is sizable.
Yeah.
And it's getting worse by the day. And I think that is something that we are sort of like, in our bubble, we don't really get that between here and, like, you know, Western Europe media. We're not getting that perspective. But I am concerned for our safety. And I got to tell you, when there's another sort of 9/11 scenario in this country, I am definitely the kind of person that will say, I told you so. I'm just saying, I will say I told you so. Because I do that. I always do that. I will be right in your face. I told you so.
Steve, how can people find your work? It's always a pleasure to have you on, my friend.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate it. It's been too long. Check out our podcast, Macro and Cheese. You can pick it up on any podcast platform. We're all over the place. It's like Macro, the letter N, and Cheese. You can also go to our website, realprogressives.org, and please go to our we have 2 YouTube channels. One is Real Progress in Action. I have been on hiatus from doing the Rogue Scholar now for about a month. I need a break. Well, because I'm tired of begging, ultimately.
Can I tell you that intro music, your intro music on that show, the intro is hands down my favorite of all podcasts, of all.
Well, it'll be back.
Shows.
It'll be back. I genuinely needed a break, and my health has been a little fluctuating here of late, but it'll come back at some point. And you can also obviously check us out on our other platform, which is the 501c3 side, which is Real Progressives, Real Progress in Action, 501c4, Real Progressives, 501c3. That you can, both of them are 2 YouTube channels. Please check out both. The Real Progressives one has most of Macro and Cheese redone in video clips, so you can see them. One of our great Kami John does some fun videos to our podcast now. So by all means, check him out. I think, there's Kami. He's in the chat.
Been in there.
By all means, check us out.
Kami John. I think him and Metal were getting into it in there.
Yeah.
Well,
man.
We have a diverse crowd.
I wish I could sit down with these people that just blast stupid comments out there and just sit down with them, smoke a J, and talk for a few minutes and just say, listen, please, for real. This is not made up. This is a law, right? If laws are made up, sure, then it's that. But the power of coercion of law is the police, and the police are used XYZ, and there's history there. It requires more reading than most people are willing to do. And that's
I recommend Audible. I recommend Audible for the people that are
use the empire,
impaired.
the evil empire. Use the evil ones against the evil ones. I'm all about it, man. Trust me. My eyes suck so bad that if I didn't have Audible or if I didn't have other audiobooks, I would literally lose my mind. But don't be afraid to read theory. Don't be afraid to read theory. Don't be afraid to read the evil socialist stuff. Don't be afraid to read Rosa Luxemburg. Don't be afraid to read Lenin. Don't be afraid to read Marx. Don't be afraid to read even Joseph Stalin. Don't be afraid to read anything, right? But just process it. And don't let your CIA filter do the processing. Use your brain. And I think you'll see some changes happen. Anyway.
I'm working on it.
Let's hope
I'm working on my brain.
Stay healthy, stay well. It's always great to have you here, and we'll see you again real soon.
Absolutely. Take it easy, guys and gals. Bye-bye.
So we have, I don't know what has happened on Twitter, but apparently, not Twitter, excuse me, Facebook. But apparently there's like 50 people watching on Facebook.
Why? Why are you guys on Facebook?
Yeah,
Join us on YouTube. Come over to YouTube.
Exactly
the weather is much better over on YouTube.
So we're going to do a segment for you guys before we go, because it's important that we talk about this. We have been we've advocated for John Fetterman. Overall, I think he's a good guy. I think he means well.
Yeah.
But whatever he's doing right now, his political calculus is extremely off. And his take on Israel-Palestine, considering who he's supposed to be, of course, we don't know him personally. We only know what he says, how he acts, and how he dresses, and so forth. But your actions will always speak louder than words. And his take on Israel-Palestine is as big a failure as anything you're going to say.
Worse than RFK?
Worse. As bad as it gets.
Oh,
so
God.
Here's a quick clip and we'll talk about
Another one bites the dust.
I'm sure there'll be other kinds of details that anyone's not able to discuss because it's classified. But nothing changes what I just said, that I'm always going to stand on the side of Israel. Always. And now it's clear that Israel was not responsible for the bombing at the hospital, and it's tragic that hundreds of innocent civilians were killed. And it was done by the same side that butchered innocent Israeli citizens over in Israel last week. And I don't know how you can get more despicable than they already are, to now they're trying to blame Israel on that, to inflame tensions all there as well, too. And I'm proud that the president visited there, and I'm going to stand with President Biden, and I'm going to stand with Israel, and I look forward to voting for whatever they need, military, intelligence, or humanitarian aid.
Johnny boy, what are you doing, man? And listen,
it's that
just
Kool-Aid,
like,
man. He drank the Kool-Aid.
Listen, if there was one state in the Rust Belt that I didn't think had any chance of going red in 24, was Michigan. Well, that's out the window now because Rashida Tlaib is to campaign for Joe Biden. I just don't see it. I don't see it happening. And the fact that her people are going to be slaughtered, there will be no. And that's the great thing about the Palestinian community of Detroit, Michigan. They protect Rashida because the establishment has come after her twice now with a lot of money. But Rashida still wins by 30 points. And so when she stands up for her constituency, and she'll do it again, and if that means that, let's say Trump wins, if Trump wins Michigan, he's winning the presidency. That's not even a question. But something along those lines would be pretty damn significant. Here's the rub now. Is John Fetterman literally throwing Pennsylvania away from Joe Biden? There was nothing, not even a shred of criticism, not even a little bit. It was this blank slate. Israel, do whatever the F you want. You want to literally mow down people in the Gaza Strip? Go right ahead.
I really want to pull up that picture that I use of Kramer holding the kid upside down in karate class. And every time that we talk about this,
Colin,
I want
if you got that one.
Well, no, it's an easy one. It's Kramer in karate class and he's holding the kid upside down. But there's a bunch of them. But that's what this is. So I find it offensive that people are referring to this as a war. I find that offensive. I find it offensive that people even refer to this as a conflict. It's not a conflict. It's an occupation. They're different. This is a conflict like slavery rebellions were a conflict. This is that kind of conflict. So if you would look at a slave rebellion and say there are two sides there, then that's this. That's what this is the equivalent to. So I'm tired of people saying it's a war. It's not a war. There's no war. You're talking about people that aren't even allowed to have the equipment and the infrastructure to clean up these buildings that are they are not even allowed bulldozers. These people are not a threat in any capacity on the same scale that you would call this a war.
It's truly disturbing that members of Congress rushed to blame Israel for the hospital tragedy in Gaza, who would take the word of a group that just massacred innocent Israeli civilians over our key ally. Here's the thing. You know what usually is the case, especially in guerrilla warfare? The story that gets leaked first is often the correct answer. It's when the media propaganda has to get involved that they have to distort the truth, which is why the New York Times had to change their banner headline on what happened at the Gaza hospital 3 times. The only reason that happens is if they have to create a narrative to convince people that what's happening there is completely justifiable on behalf of the Israeli armed forces.
Okay, why would we take the word of a group that just massacred innocent Israel civilians? Okay. First of all, the people that I saw reporting on this were not people from Hamas, right? Like it were Palestinians in the region that reporting on this, but it wasn't like the head of Hamas saying, oh no, it wasn't us. So no, that's not what we're going with. But Israel is not only in violation of so many international laws that we ended up with removing ourselves from the International Criminal Court. Okay. So when you're talking about people that lie, they have bombed that hospital. I want to say like within a week prior, but this hospital has been a prior target of Israel. So to say that it was an accident, and by the way, the power necessary, or the whatever you would call it, the tools necessary to create that type, the weaponry, that kind of explosion isn't even had by the people that they're blaming. That kind of weapon is exactly. Thank you, Colin. Every time we're talking about Israel and the Palestinians, this is the image that I want to be in people's heads, because this is when you would call this is about as fair of a fight as that is a war. It's absurd. And I am so tired. And all this shows to me is that we have a Congress, just with very few exceptions, full of people that are willfully, remember, there's one of two choices. They're either willfully ignorant on this, where something's not right, but they're choosing not to know because they don't want to ruffle feathers. So they don't really want to dig too deep, or they know and they're lying to you. That's it. Those are the two choices. And it's sad for me to say, I don't know which one Fetterman falls into. I'd like to say willfully ignorant, although again, that's not necessarily a bonus. But yeah, no, this is not a war. And no, I don't believe Hamas people about their massacre. And I think that's horrible. And I don't think there's anything okay about that. But no, I don't believe a word that comes out of Israel's State Department any more than I believe a word that comes out of ours.
You know, the same is true when we're looking at this. Again, I always say you just have to look at it from an objective perspective. There is no defending what Hamas did. But if you cannot see that having what is essentially an open-air prison of over 2 million people, because you're trying to commit an ethnic cleanse, is not going to spur terror cells, again, you can't be willfully ignorant on this issue. What you can be is believe that there should be an ethno-Jewish state. Now, if that is what you believe, then just own it. Doesn't mean it's right, but to pretend like you're not going to massacre people in order to create it, you're a fool.
It's not possible.
It's not possible. And the only way that this ends without endless war and without more Hamases popping up all over the place is you have to end the occupation. There is no other way.
And I recently, and I had forwarded it to Peter because I kind of wanted to put it, like link it to stuff. But Democracy Now! Guys is really doing, I believe, a very good job. It's as close to mainstream as I get, but in covering this. And she, Amy Goodman, recently they had on, forget it, even if I knew his name, I wouldn't be able to pronounce it. It's somebody, he's a Palestinian representative from an organization, and he lives in the West Bank, and they had him on. And the sentiment that the world has right now regarding this is Israel is wrong. The United States is wrong for supporting it. And we are being blamed in that same vein. So again, I will reiterate, when the next sort of 9/11 thing happens here, or we start seeing more and more violence here from people who either are directly related or affiliated or whatever, it won't be remotely surprising to me, because we are now, it's like when you lay down with dogs, you wake up with fleas. We are now associating, supporting, condoning a genocide.
And that's unfortunate. And there are things that Amy Goodman says that I don't agree with even a little bit.
That might be, guys, I'm not here to debate the thing about Democracy Now! I watch it to see what's going on is my basic thing. I don't take it for everything, but they do. I've always said I do appreciate their coverage of how they handle Israel-Palestine. I think that they have if anything, they lean left on that for sure. If you were looking at it, again, I'm not saying Amy Goodman is the be all end all of I have respect for her. She has definitely walked the walk for many, many years. But yeah, no, their coverage. And I honestly it was like today. It was today or maybe yesterday. And it was the gentleman, I want to say, oh my God, I will never remember his name. It's a Palestinian representative. He's somebody, a business type looking suit person, talking head. And it was quite good what he was saying. And I think that we have no idea how the world sees us. And this was a really good glimpse into that. And it really made me feel concerned for our safety. So for the people, especially the Jews, that somehow are convinced that the existence of a state of Israel is necessary for safety of Jews worldwide, I beg to differ. I actually think that this is making us less safe as Jews in the diaspora, and definitely less safe in this country. It's not working. And the consistent conflation by people like our representative between Judaism and Zionism is not helping either. Okay, you are perpetuating anti-Semitism. We are on the wrong side of history as a country when we're supporting this genocide. And it's not going to end well. It's not going to end well for us.
And if you think it's bad now, watch this clip and you'll understand why it's going to get a lot worse.
On October 7th, Hamas murdered 1,400 Israelis, maybe more. This is in a country of fewer than 10 million people. This would be equivalent to over 50,000 Americans murdered in a single day. That's 29 11s. That is why October 7th is another day that will live in infamy. Mr. President, you rightly said that Hamas is worse than ISIS. The German chancellor who visited here yesterday said that Hamas were the new Nazis. You're both right. And just as the civilized world united to defeat the Nazis and united to defeat ISIS, the civilized world must unite to defeat Hamas. There's only one thing better than having a true friend like you standing with Israel, and that is having you standing in Israel. Your visit here is the first visit of an American president in Israel at a time of war. It is deeply, deeply moving.
I want the people of Israel, the people of the world, to know where the United States stands. I've had my great Secretary of State here. He's been here for a lot, but I wanted to personally come and make that clear. Terrorist group Hamas has slaughtered, as has been pointed out, over 1,300 people. And it's not hyperbole to suggest slaughtered. And, well, at any rate, that's who we are. Not just me, but I mean, that's who the United States is. And it's just not the example of our power, it's the power of our example. It's almost as important. The world's looking. Israel has a value set like the United States does and other democracies. And they're looking to see what we're going to do.
You just wait until the ads start with the GOP next summer.
I will say he was right about one thing, though. He was right about one thing. You just see what they're going to do, and that Israel does have the same mindset as us. You are absolutely right about that. Yeah. We share the same mindset.
When they when the GOP, whether it's Trump or whoever, is doing ads next summer that are basically going to show this man ready to
He was like falling asleep.
It's so, you cannot sell that. Just like Vosh was on on Monday saying that you can't sell RFK's voice. Well, you know what?
You can't sell Sleepy Joe.
You can't sell that.
No. And also, can we all just stop for a moment and think of the irony of Netanyahu calling out someone else as a Hitler? Let's just process that for a second, because right now, to me, I want to take that image of Joe and Netanyahu hugging and superimpose Hitler over Netanyahu's face, because I promise you that is how this will play in history. This won't age well.
The good news is, if there is any silver lining to what's happening here, the good news there is an uprising of free Palestinian sentiment in this country. It is very real. And the reception that Jen has gotten on social media, even down here, there's always exceptions. It's obviously always going to be a handful
better than it's ever been.
Better than it's ever been. But it's reflective in that people recognize that major change is coming in this world. And one of those changes is going to be the freedom of the Palestinian people.
Wait, guys, and before we do this is shout out. You're going to play the Jewish Voice for Peace. So, guys, Jewish Voice for Peace, great organization that I am a part of. They held a really nice gathering in the Capitol, and apparently there were a whole bunch of arrests because nothing screams authoritarian like arresting peace activists. That's my tribes people. That's my tribes people. Yeah, again, reiterating, Judaism and Zionism, not the same thing. We actually know one of the rabbis that was there in that circle in the center in the rotunda, and that was, yeah, no, but it's hard. It's hard for everybody to say it. If you're a Jew, you're called a self-loathing Jew. If you're not, you're called an anti-Semite. It's you can't win with these people.
But I don't think that sentiment is working anmore.
It's
I don't
fading.
think that it is fading. It's like everybody's a racist. Everybody, I remember when the entire crusty liberal class could not get over the fact that Trump became president of the United States. And they had to blame everyone and anyone that they could get their hands on to give them their wrath, because their worldview got completely distorted and shattered right before their eyes. So as it became, everyone was a sexist, everyone was a racist, everyone was an anti-Semite, everyone was at fault but themselves, just like everyone took after Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton blamed everyone under the sun other than herself, including the fact that they had to literally rig a presidential primary in order to make her the selected candidate, and she still couldn't win the election. And then it became everybody else's fault but their own. And this is the same sentiment that we're seeing here right now.
I like that.
The same sentiment that we see here right now is that if you do not go along with exactly what the Israeli armed forces are going to do under Netanyahu's guidance, you are a anti-Semite or a self-loathing Jew. And I got to tell you, that's not working like it used to.
I wanted to answer this. Multimind, I saw her recently, like within the past day or so, on a live stream. She is fighting the fight, and I cannot remember exactly where she is, but Medea is all in this. She was, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like everything between Ukraine and South America, she's like on it, but she's only one person who, but I assure you, she's on the correct side of history on this.
That she definitely is. And this is why, you come to a point of like a fork in the road, so to speak, and you have to decide, what do you want to do? What do you want to, how much heat are you willing to take to do the right thing? And
to me, I feel like cook me, I'm done. You know what I mean? Like I am so enraged about this whole thing right now that it is like there is no, and yet completely resolved at the same time. Like, sure. I am very resolved. I've never been more like content as far as like where my position is on this and where I stand. Like, I'm very comfortable. But I am so enraged about all of this right now, and that this is happening, and that we have like a guy falling asleep on stage talking to a fascist, giving him lots of money to do things that a whole bunch of people are standing here telling him we don't want you to do. And yet they're doing it anyway. I find it so infuriating. This is up there for me with like the people coming at my bodily autonomy level of rage. So between those two things simultaneously, I am full of rage. So, which is not necessarily good, but it is true. I mean, like, I am so like, yeah.
I'm with you.
Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, we're at the point of no return now. And now the question is, what's going to happen? Because if this ground invasion does begin, and it begins with, at a minimum, 2,000 American troops that are going to be heading over there, I mean, we are this close to World War III.
Not
This
in
is
my
not
name.
this is not a joke. Like, this is very real.
You're like, this is like, I don't think people,
You know?
this is very close to like a situation with Iran, which we will not win.
No, because if Hezbollah gets it,
We will not win.
This is like Vietnam all over again.
Well, no, I say that's Ukraine, sort of. I mean, Ukraine is going to be
But
lingering
we're
forever
going
and a
into
day.
places where we don't belong, and the fact is,
We don't belong anywhere.
How long did you think you would be able to keep people under occupation? People have reached the point where their attitude is,
but they're building tunnels.
No, but their attitude is, I don't care if I die. When you get to the point where millions of people say, I don't care if I die, you can't beat them. It's not possible.
And when you look at, and now I've been watching so many things about this that I cannot remember which clip I was watching, where the 1,500 fighters, the Hamas fighters, or that died, that were killed in Israel when they were massacring their people, those guys knew they weren't coming back alive. They knew that. But the thing is, like, to them, their life isn't worth anything anyway there. Wait, like, you really are talking about people that have nothing to lose. How long will people are willing to live in captivity? And let me ask anybody, what would you do if you were born in captivity? How would you act? Well, this is why I say this is not a war. It's essentially more akin to a slave rebellion. What I would have been dead a long time ago. And the thing is, these are people that have tried getting recourse from the international community. They've gone to the international courts. They've gone to the UN. They've gone to Amnesty. They can't get any sort of international recourse. Then you've got BDS, which now is like, in this state, in this country, you've got a bunch of states where you can't do BDS. So those are your nonviolent protest options. So then you had, when I forget the years, when they were having the March of Return every Friday, and you had Israeli snipers killing medics, killing journalists, shooting people that were in a nonviolent, and yes, there were rock and tire on fire throwers. Yes, there were sort of like when Black Lives Mattered. Yes, there were riots and things did get out of control with some people, but the majority of it was nonviolent. They were killed. So when you've taken away all avenues of nonviolent resistance, what do you think is going to happen? And by the way, I am so certain that Netanyahu had no problem hanging out his own people to dry. Couldn't care less. They're too busy in the West Bank.
Egyptian intelligence says that they had a 3-day notice that this attack was coming.
Yeah,
and they did
again, this. And so when he wants to sit there and say, make comparisons to 9/11, yes. And I'll even give you that same sort of thought that I gave to our government at the time was, yeah, you knew and you just took advantage of it and or participated in it. And I whatever, he's sitting there like trying to play the victim. Like, this is a war. It's not a war. It's more of a slave rebellion akin. So I would ask people to do research into things like Nat Turner's rebellion and things like that, where there were slave rebellions where, innocent civilians got killed. They did kill white people that were not necessarily at fault and not necessarily responsible. And yet, would you condemn slave rebellions? Do you condemn the actions of the occupied? It's hard to do that. It's like, because I know I would. If I were born in captivity, at some point, I would end up in some sort of violent situation, and especially when you've taken away all other avenues of protest.
Yeah. And again, Metalopoly and anyone else out there, no one is defending what Hamas did, but to not understand why they did it or who they were doing it on behalf of, you're just naive. Like, you're just naive.
How do you ever deal with something if you don't understand it?
If somebody is stepping on your throat, and the only way that you can get them off your throat is by shooting them, trust me, you would use the gun. That's
exactly. Exactly. Yes. It's not that you have the right to do that. I'm not saying, and for the most part, I don't think that is what is sought out. But in times when that's the only thing you can see doing, and you're raised in captivity in an environment where your captor has had their foot on your neck your entire life, yeah, I feel enraged, and I live this life of privilege. So
when you make statements like that, you're deliberately being woefully ignorant. You're doing it on purpose.
no,
You're not being an
that's
honest,
not what
you're
I'm
not being an honest
no,
actor.
I'm saying that it is not a war, it is not a conflict, it's an occupation. And when people are occupied and see no other way out, they will rise up. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying I agree with massacring innocent people. I don't agree with that. It's horrible. But I understand where this comes from. Guys, I'm really with Norman Finkelstein on this. I am. It's very hard for me to not understand, because I would do that.
We're working on it, Steve. We will have Norman back on. We will have a lot of people
We had him
back
on. It wasn't that long ago that we had him on.
But he apparently wants to come back on again.
Oh,
so
yeah,
we're
for
gonna
sure.
work on schedule.
But I agree with him on this. It's like you can condemn like atrocities of horrible things happening. But it's really hard for me to condemn people backed in a corner doing something irrational, because I can't imagine where I would be. I am so tired of the Western perception of this.
And every decision that's being made, every decision is to literally create a mass genocide. That's what they're doing. When they have the audacity to talk about we're sending $100 million in aid, you have to remember that's nothing in the grand scheme of things. And most of that aid is never going to get there. In fact, my understanding is that aid is being intercepted and sent to Ukraine. So be it as it may, we have to be completely transparent and honest about what's going on and how we got here. No one is defending killing innocent people, and no one is defending Hamas. But as I've said for the 50th time, if you can't understand how Hamas gets created and ends up doing what they're doing, then you are completely lost.
And that whole like sort of straw man or whataboutism and that whole thing, that is the opposite of nuance. I cannot have, like, the only way we can deal with these things is to have a real reasonable, nuanced discussion, not just shout talking points back and forth. But there's no way to do that without looking at the history here. We created Hamas. So that's like a Dr. Frankenstein situation. We created Hamas. Why did we create Hamas? Because we preferred them. We thought they would be more amenable. They would play ball more so than the Palestinian Authority. So we did not, and there were a lot of things. I just finished Jimmy Carter's book, the recent one that he did, like it was a couple years ago already, about Israel, Palestine. And it's really uncanny. Every single step of the way where Palestinians were willing to make concessions, it was Israel that wasn't playing ball. And yet we were taught that Israel was doing this and they wouldn't accept it. Yeah, they didn't accept your shit offer. You're right. They didn't accept shit offers. That is true. But every step of the way, Israel was the impediment. Every step of the way. And I don't want to hear about Jimmy Carter being anti-Semitic, because the truth is, even if he were, which I don't think he is, but even if he were, we're talking about documenting things that happened in terms of the person in the meetings with these people. So it's not his opinion. This is like what happened in meetings with these people. It's not a war. It's not a war.
That's for sure. So as you guys know, our channel is demonetized.
And at this rate, we're not going to get it back.
We're never getting it back. So the only way this channel is ever making money is if you pony up. $5 gets you the Lulu sticker. Jen, you really need to. We need to.
It doesn't. It's not. We're not. That stuff is not necessarily like the $10 category. It's a completely separate issue.
Take a video of it on Saturday.
Yes.
What are you doing on Saturday?
I am displaying some of my crafty things at the Miramar Library, guys. I will be at the Miramar Public Library in the lobby. My is what I'm told. And I'm not even entirely sure what the thing is. It's with the women, with the Friends of the Library. Mm-hmm. And I'm showing off my arts and wares and hopefully, be able to sell some product.
For those who are
so much inventory.
For those who are nice enough to donate $25 or more, you get yourself the Jen Change jersey, which I am wearing right now. It is.
And there's one on its way to Colinello. One on its way to Colinello. If you guys $25 in the Cash App will also,
You want
get
one
you
of these bad boys, but of course, if you are,
and the truth is, we have these too.
Yeah.
We have purples. We have
Make a
purple
choice.
tees now, guys. If you want a purple tee, they're the same. They're just inverse.
Cash App, $Gen Change. Any amount is obviously appreciated.
Yeah.
You know, we're trying to do what we can. Remember, we don't do this for a living. We do this to transform
That's for
politics into
sure.
service. But we do want to be able to obviously compensate our producer.
Very much
and our
so.
graphic, our shorts creator.
I haven't even been able to.
Yeah.
Guys,
So
we haven't been able to pay Ben.
We need help. Anything you guys can do would be tremendously appreciated.
And the people that help us, also, it's a labor of love. Nobody is helping us for money.
They believe in what we're doing.
Nobody is helping us for money. And I tell people up front, because there is none of that here. And I do feel a little bit aware of it more so now, because we're going into campaign season, and normally this is where we are supporting especially local candidates for things, and even in nonpartisan races, this is where we're supporting our local people, and we really are not in a position to help so much this year, which really is kind of not great.
Unless I start making money, which may or may not happen.
You never know.
I think it could.
It could happen.
Trying.
It could happen. In theory, I could make money. Somebody could come and see my artwork and think it's the best thing they ever saw.
I actually think it's pretty good, and I'm not one to just say that.
No, it is. Look, guys, I do. I like myself. If I didn't like it, I wouldn't make it. I make art because I like what I'm making. I don't make it to sell it. I just want to sell it so I could keep making it without inventory piling up all around me. So I made a couple of pieces yesterday that I really like. So I make it because I like it. So I think it's pretty, but it's not necessarily everybody's thing.
Well, with that said, we appreciate all of you guys. This has been an extremely lively chat between Multimind, Metalopoly, and Traverse versus the world, it seems like.
Oh, metal. For
everybody that is here, whether it is our good friend Guy Giberson, Nadia, DJ, Richard, Aditya, Paul,
appreciate you guys.
Welcome, Scott Schneider.
And also, I don't know if our new patron Nancy is watching, but Nancy, your stuff is also on its way to you.
Guys, remember to subscribe, to click the bell, to share. We have a new clip up. We've got multiple clips coming with Vosh. We'll obviously have multiple clips coming with Steve.
And what do we have coming up on Monday?
Nothing scheduled yet, but
Peter likes to fly by the seat of his pants. And then, by the way, he also shows up in here literally 30 seconds before we're going live.
But we still managed to put on.
I know he doesn't care that it causes me anxiety.
But we still managed to put on a good show.
We do, but it causes me anxiety. That's why this is why I have to sit here and smoke.
Oh, because it's all me. All right.
No, it's not all you, but the anxiety every single time with you. It's like you wait till the last possible minute to get here. It causes me anxiety.
Well, the good news is we have a 5-minute startup, so there's really...
So Saturday, instead of canvassing, I'm working the Miramar Library.
And then we're canvassing Sunday.
We can canvass Sunday because when's my team playing?
You have Sunday Night Football against the Philadelphia Eagles.
Okay, and let me say, I am not
Did you get your new jersey?
So no, and then I complained about it, and then I even called PayPal and complained about it. So then I get an email saying they're sorry it got lost, except for now I ordered another one. So now I'm going to have 2 of them.
They have to compensate you for at least one of them.
No. I ordered from another place that I found it when I realized I thought this place was a scam. I'm like, I haven't heard from them. I'm not getting my jersey.
So are they both the same color?
I think they're both going to be exactly the same jersey. So I'm going to have 2 of them. Maybe I'll just give one to Graham or something. We'll see. But I have not unveiled my jersey number yet. And for people, if you do not know, I am a lifelong Dolphins fan. Did you
get a Ray Finkel jersey?
I started going to home games in 1973-ish. I was about 2 years old. My dad had season tickets. And I started going to games in the Orange Bowl. I wore number 22. I was a Mercury Morris fan when I was little. And then I progressed into number 13. And I still will always forever be, Dan is my man. And so this is only my 3rd number that I'm ever going to wear. And I will be unveiling my new jersey number as soon as I get it. And I'm very excited. And so it's a big thing for me. I don't take on a number lightly. And so even up until last year, I was still wearing my Dan jersey. But so now I will be sporting a new jersey. And then once I do, anybody with connections to said player, please have him.
And of course, I'm a lifeless Giants fan, just mulling around.
I feel for you, though. I feel that. Where this is we have not had a team in so many years. It's like we have risen from the dead.
Listen, in a perfect world, it's Dolphins, Lions in the Super Bowl. That would be.
Why is that your perfect? I'm really concerned about getting past Philadelphia. I am. And I also know, but Tua and Jalen are like friends. The whole thing is very Alabama incestuous. But I am concerned about how we will be. I mean, because Philly is definitely a big challenge, and us not being home. And I don't know. I get concerned. So I hope my jersey's here. If it is, actually, if I get 2, you could be wearing one, and we could have like total mojo.
Oh, well,
we could totally support the team.
We'll see about that. Anyway, we appreciate each and every one of you. I don't know how we got such a big audience on Facebook, but I am very
yeah, why is that happening?
As to why that is the case. We've had a great audience here on
Guys,
YouTube.
why are you like what's coming on? Like I'm wondering like why we're popping up.
Maybe
it's
it was
weird.
just shared to the MMT community.
So guys, if you're not subscribers on YouTube, please subscribe on YouTube. We're not monetized, but it still helps our numbers.
It definitely does. And we are grateful for each and every one of you.
We might get our monetization back at some point.
We might, but I'm not holding my breath, and neither should any of you. So any help is always appreciated. Thank you so much.
Bye, y'all.
See you Monday.